In this week's episode of Casual Watch Talk, we talk all about our top tips for not buying a new watch in 2025 and can we commit to not buying any new luxury watches in 2025. Stay tuned to find out. Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Casual Watch Talk, bringing the podcast back. Thank you everyone for all of the positive feedback from last week's show. I am joined again by Todd.
Hi everybody, so happy to be back. Really enjoying this format.
Yes, and thanks for all the feedback on email. I got a few on Instagram, Casual Watch Reviews on Instagram, and then also some private messages as well, which was nice. Some people that had listened all those years ago to the first original podcast, and now we're bringing it back in 2025. Well, this week we thought we would talk about how not to buy a watch, which, having said that, I envisioned the theme as talking about how I was going to thin the collection and also how I'm going to try and not make a big watch purchase this year. But I suppose, Todd, it also sounds like it might be an episode on how you shouldn't buy watches on forums or something, but I don't think we'll get...
No, it's funny to me because we're episode 2 into the relaunch of this podcast, and it's two guys who are emphatically telling you how not to buy a watch this year, which is fine. and we'll get into it in the conversation. There's a way you can be an enthusiast without going broke. There we go. There's your theme.
There you go. We'll retitle it. We'll retitle the episode, How to Be Enthusiast Without Going Broke. But
there we go.
It's interesting. I've been thinking a lot about this, especially when I went on my Grand Seiko binge. I think it was last year, and it's certainly the year before as well when I actually went to Japan. I've been thinking about this year definitely taking a step back from making a bigger purchase.
I think, as we talked about in the most recent episode, it's a challenge for me in my collecting in that I've kind of found a little bit of everything that I love, and now I'm much more analytical about, all right, what am I... Okay, I'm going to back it up. I don't have a ton of disposable income. So an expensive watch is a considered purchase for me. And I have to go, okay, what am I going to do to make that purchase? And so I've gotten to this really sweet spot in my collecting journey where I'm like, I've got a really fun collection, and any given day I can pull something out that I enjoy. It doesn't change the fact that I love watches, and I get really excited when I see new releases or something that, like, you had one, you've had several come through, and I'm like, ooh, I want to buy that from you, Sam. And then I go, do I really though? Do I really want to spend the money? And so this year is sort of maybe a minute where I'm going to take a breath and enjoy my collection, but it doesn't change how much I enjoy what's happening in the industry at large.
Yeah, I agree. I think we both live in the US, so we don't exactly know how 2025 is going to play out. There's a new administration in. There's definitely some promises that have been made that we don't yet know the substance behind economic policy that's being stated. So there's definitely a cautiousness. I know the stock market has not been feeling too well recently over the Christmas period. It'll be funny when we listen back to this maybe next year. And I'm feeling it as well. I work in an industry that does get impacted by things like inflation and so on. That's what I'm thinking, because I buy and sell a lot of watches, but I also have a core collection that I do wear, and that really is only 3 or 4 watches. I'll usually wear the Seiko Quartz. This week I was visiting customers. I was wearing my Bremont, which I still really like, the Bremont, and then I have usually a watch that I'm reviewing. And this is where I've got to be really careful about this, because I do have the luxury of being lent watches in or watches being sent in for review. So I guess it's easy for me to say I'm not going to add any watches to the collection, but I still have access to watches, which isn't easy, I don't think, for a lot of people who probably only have access to watches that aren't their own. If they go into a store, that's like a buying relationship, or if they go to a watch meetup, I guess.
Yeah, you get that sort of new user experience without the pain. Which is a very enviable position. I will say, and conversely, this drawer I have this little, it's really cool. I've got this chest of drawers that I bought from an old watchmaker. So it's a bunch of it's a Longines chest, which was kind of cool to get. But the top drawer is full of straps and bracelets. And so that's the way I do that, what you're doing. I don't necessarily buy, but boy, I can play with a lot of combinations and go like, oh, I would like try this strap, try this bracelet on today, and change the look and feel of the watch which is another way to do what you're doing. But yeah, you have a very unique, enviable position to get those pieces in and be like, okay, I get to live with this for a little bit, and it's like it's a new piece.
It's a double-edged sword, I think, as well. I am lucky to get the watches in for review. I've had a lot come in recently that have been loaners that I've sent back. Usually when I work with Citizen, they've only sent me one watch to keep, and that was actually a gift that they'd sent me, which I suspect it was one of the quirky models, so I suspect they were struggling to shift them, but I'm still grateful of that. Same with Christopher Ward. I've got a couple of Christopher Wards ready to go back. So it doesn't necessarily matter to me whether they're given to me or lent in. I do like the exposure, but also I think it's like, luckily I met my wife I did some online dating, but it was that long ago. There was only Match.com in the UK, and it didn't have the swipe type of thing. Whereas I think modern dating, where there's the Tinder effect or whatever, where there's so many options you're swiping through that you don't necessarily have pause, or when you do go on a date, you're wondering, oh, is the next one going to be better? I think that's the flip side of seeing a lot of watches. I guess watch dealers might feel like that as well. A review watch to me feels not necessarily transactional. I liken it to if I was a restaurant reviewer. I really enjoy the meal, or I would not like the meal. I really enjoy the watch, or I might not like the watch. But once I've finished it and done the review and it's packaged, edited and uploaded, my brain shifts away from that period of time with that watch is now over.
I'm curious. I have an everyman question for you. Sort of the listener question maybe they have. I don't know. This is the one I've had. When you have these watches in for review, are you particularly nervous about them? Scratching them, damaging them? Like, do you baby them when you have them, or do you wear them like you wear other watches?
This is a really good question. Because obviously when you first start out, you're very nervous about scratching a watch, or you're very nervous about damaging it. Somebody sent me a Christopher Ward, for example. I've got 2 watches here that probably total $4,000. But I think as you get more used to reviewing them, I do a lot of the B-roll when I first take the watch out of the box. This is a bit behind the scenes. When I first take the watch out of the box, I do the B-roll, but then I wear the watch to then do the review. Often, if you're seeing wrist shots and stuff like that, it's typically once I've adjusted the bracelet and I'm wearing it, but I do the B-roll at the start, because once you start wearing a watch, especially when you're doing macro, all the little bits of debris and skin and stuff, it's very hard to, especially a crown on a watch, is very hard to clean afterwards. And especially if you've been winding it, it's just something like the oils off your finger or something under macro. It looks like a biohazard. The crown on a watch, it's very hard to get a crown on a watch. I think, especially because I do a lot of dive watches, so they have that grip, that knurling on them. I do worry about that the most, or that the fingerprints are very hard. The B-roll, I would say, is the second trickiest part. I think the most trickiest part is the narrative of the review. I envy people like Watch Chris that can just freestyle a review that's full of a lot of detail. I do. If it's a very detailed review, I do have to review it. But going back to what you were saying about the watches, I've so far never had anyone complain about a watch that's been sent back. But I do know other reviewers that have had watches sent to them that have been in a bit of a sorry state, or they've sent a watch, because sometimes you'll daisy chain. This doesn't happen as much as it used to, but oftentimes, especially with a prototype watch, a Kickstarter watch, you might be asked to send it to another reviewer instead of back to the brand.
Right.
So I know, I won't mention who it is, but I know a reviewer who sent a watch to somebody else. That other person had it for quite a while, and then they sent it back, but the watch company thought that he'd damaged the watch, so he actually had a little bit of a fight with it. But obviously you can see all the macro and stuff like that on his review versus the next review. I guess that was a long-winded question to say it was something that I worried about at the start, but I don't really worry about. And I guess for the watch company, they're rolling the dice as well, sending the watches out. There's no contractual arrangement. There's no agreement that if they send a watch, I'll even review it. There's no, I never sign a contract or anything or terms to say.
Interesting. Because I remember there was one that you reviewed, and it was one of the bronze ones. And you were like, the fingerprints of the previous reviewer are on this watch. It's not like you're going to remove it without going through that whole process of, what is it, lemon juice and whatever else to kind of extricate the oils from the case. But it's interesting.
Yeah, the bronze ones are really funny, aren't they? I just did that Zelos one where I was on Watch Crunch, which I'm trying to, my New Year's resolution is to try and do more on Watch Crunch, because I do think they've fostered a really good community over on the website Watch Crunch. I was mentioning on there about how the recent Zelos, I think there was such a copper. I think if there's more copper in the bronze, it patinas straight away. Like a copper pipe would in a DIY store when you pick it up and it leaves your handprint on there. I joked that it had pre-patinaed, like it had come already patinaed, even in the factory when they'd wiped a cloth or perhaps some dust off it, and the marks from the cloth were already ingrained into so the bronze ones. I think they are tricky to review to make look pristine.
Right. We got, what are we? Like 18 minutes into this, and we didn't do a wrist check. I just realized we just jumped into it. So we should just, like, our friends over, Dave and Ricky. They just do it. They do it halfway through. We should probably do a wrist check.
Let's do a wrist check. Absolutely. Go on. You do the honors.
Yeah. This week I mixed it up and went back to play around in my watch box, unlike what I said last week, because I felt guilty after we talked about it. And this is a really fun watch that I've been wearing. It's the Seiko Dress KX. And I'm not sure which model it is, but it's like the SRPE ones. It's like the bezel-less version of their Seiko 5 Sports. It is a great watch. For about $200, you're getting 80% of the Black Bay 36 feel. It's not going to be the same bracelet. It's not going to be the same case. But when you have it on wrist, you're going, for $200, I'm getting an awful lot of watch.
That could have gone either way, making a smooth bezel on an order. But the modding community had been doing that for a while, haven't they? So it wasn't completely uncharted territory.
No, I think whoever first was like, you know what, Tudor did it. They had this Black Bay, and they're like, if they took the bezel off, they had a second watch, but it's really the same watch. It just doesn't have the bezel, but it's a very good looking watch. And Samuel, you should be happy. It has the day and date. So unlike it, but I love wearing it. And the next thing I did on this particular one was, there's a company called Namoki Mods that does specific mods for Seikos, or has the pieces so you can do it yourself. And they have a wonderful tapered oyster style bracelet that goes from 16 or 20 down to 16. And it is like that vintage vibe. And so it's like, this is a fun little watch to wear without a huge investment. So that's what I'm wearing today.
I am also wearing a Seiko, although I was wearing a Braemont for most of today, but I had a long drive back. But I put on my Seiko Solar, my SNE 593, I think it is. I always forget, but I still look forward to wearing after several months. There's something about Seiko cases on their watches that they have a warmth to them. Isn't it weird that?
Yeah, they are so comfortable to wear. Their bracelets are a disaster on the lower end, but the cases are so well made. They're very comfortable.
I think this is what, we'll do this on another episode, but why I was so shocked by the Grand Seiko. And I made that video on why I hate my Grand Seiko, that. And a lot of people are like, well, you didn't try it on. You didn't try it on, did you, first? And a lot of the comments have replied respectfully saying there wasn't even a question in my mind that a Seiko case would wear badly.
Fair enough.
The last thing that I would have thought that, especially on, for example, on yours that's sub $300 or whatever, It fits like a glove. Well, then I was paying 10 times that.
Yeah.
Not a question in my mind, but that's perhaps a subject for another time.
Yeah, we should totally have that conversation, because I'm very curious, because I don't know how many Seikos in my collection. I love them all. They fit great. From a Samurai to a Turtle to these to the 5 Sport. They're great. I love them. And they're like, to me, this is my swatch collection. Swatches irritate me because they're practically disposable, and you're spending half as much as an inexpensive Seiko. And you go, oh, I'm going to throw away $150. I'm not doing that. That's not my life.
Well, maybe we'll do an episode on, this is a tease for it. Maybe we'll do something titled like why Sam sold 3 watches that most people would keep for a lifetime. Like the Black Bay 58, the Rolex Datejust, the Spring Drive.
Yes, please, let's have that conversation, because I need to know why, especially that Rolex. Why?
Yeah, we'll tease it.
Okay.
Well, let's go back to the episode today, the subject today, which is we're starting out January. We're talking a good game here that we're not going to add any. I feel like I should say significant purchase, but I think I need to be more disciplined and say I'm trying to not buy a watch for this year. We're talking a good game, but I think the subject of the episode is how not to buy a watch. So what are we going to do to not? What tips do we have for somebody that's also looking to buy less this year? What tips do we have for them? Do we even know ourselves?
I don't know. Because I think you and I are both in an enviable position. I'm going to be completely transparent. Not everybody is sitting in the spot that you and I are in. So it's that sort of like that question of how to earn $1 million doing this. And it's like, first, get $1 million. So we're already there. I don't have $1 million, but I already have a lot of watches. So it's easy I think for you and me to go like, okay, I could take a break and assess my collection. But that's the honest truth. If someone who's listening right now has got one or hasn't, or just deciding they're going to start this adventure, this is probably a terrible conversation for you. But anybody that has, let's say more than 5 or 10, this is what this conversation's for. And that is, first of all, not to be too zen, but kind of take a minute and enjoy what you have. You've bought these watches. You bought them with a purpose. Hopefully, this wasn't just, every one of them wasn't just like, I'll buy it and not have a thought process getting to it. I like one of the guys in our WhatsApp group, Michael. He has done this experiment a couple times now where he just wears one watch a day for a month and spends a month kind of re-exploring, re-enjoying his collection. And that's a really good first step. If you only have 5, wear one watch for a week or a month. Fall in love with that watch. There's a reason you bought it in the first place. You loved it. That would be my first step, is to step back and go, let me enjoy what it is I bought and see why I loved it.
That's also a weird paradox, not a paradox necessarily, but it's something that anybody that collects anything grapples with, don't they? Because especially with watches, the thrill of the chase, I think, with a watch is multiples, isn't it? And if you're collecting, say, baseball cards or something like that, about the card itself, the stock that it's on, the image, there is certain elements to it. But with a watch, there's hundreds of data points about a single watch, isn't there? The history of it, what the case is made of, the bracelet, the movement, where the movement originally came from, as the movement been checked. There's so much intensive research that you can do on a watch before purchase. That research, I think, is also what a lot of collectors really enjoy. I think you can still do that research without necessarily having to own the watch. For example, there's some really good in-depth articles. Periscope on Instagram, for example, who's basically almost like a true crime detective, but on rare watches, is a great one if you really want to get into the weeds. And because the good thing with that is you're learning about watches that you would never ever be able to own. This piece unique Rolex, and then the watches of espionage as well on Instagram, newsletter and website. That's a great one, because again, you would never be able to own those watches because it's Saddam Hussein's watch or a watch that was used in World War II. Those are really interesting articles, usually with a military or Secret Service slant, about watches of history that have been worn by famous leaders or dictators or during wars and stuff like that. So I think you can still get that buzz researching watches, but knowing that you'll never really be able to own them, so you're not compelled, I guess.
Well, and that was always one of my early on inspirations in being an enthusiast, is that I remember someone saying that, like, how can I be in one of my forums, they were like, how can you be excited about watches if they're ones you can't buy? You're looking at these new releases. And to me, it's kind of like a guy who likes to go to a car show. Again, I brought the car analogy up again, but how many cars can you have realistically? If you're an average person, your driveway is going to be the limit. But those guys will go to a car show every weekend or a car meetup and admire them. And I think that's, if you can get your mind there with your watch collecting journey, that I would like to look at. I want to see the craziest watch with the most complications. I will never own that. I can't afford that. But it's really, if you like watches, learn about it, read about it, watch videos on it. And I enjoy that as much as the ones in my collection. I enjoy just seeing where this crazy hobby goes, or this crazy industry goes. Like, what can they do? How far can they push it? Especially in a mechanical world. These little gears and these little, it blows my mind what people can figure out how to do with a watch. Unlike, sure, my iPhone or my Apple Watch can do everything in the world. That's cheating. When you can do it with little tiny gears and little tiny springs, that's a whole new magic. And I enjoy learning about that.
In a world where everything is, the whole goal of most other things is to make them as simple and as easy to use, a watch is almost, it's a commitment, isn't it? Certainly owning a mechanical watch is a commitment that you're going to keep it going, and it will look after you by telling you the time or looking good on your wrist, but you've also got the responsibility of making sure it's wound and it's running and it's the date, the time set and things like that. It's not so simplified that you're taken out of the process. You are still involved. You are actually winding it with your hand if it's a manual wind.
No, you're totally, I'm feeling like this is going to be this grand analogy. So we're like the shark and it's that little fish that hangs along by this.
Oh yeah, the two cleaning.
They work together. That's what your watch is. It's like that little fish. They like sit by our side.
Relationship, yeah.
Totally. Well, I'm glad you came along with me for that little journey.
Yeah, I'm here for it. But I think the next one would be to help not buying watches would be if you've got a friend or another watch collector that you know that you trust, and perhaps you can swap watches with them, not on a permanent basis, but maybe loaning the watch. I guess it'd have to be somebody you really trusted, but or just more affordable watches.
Yeah, maybe more affordable watches, because that opens a whole can of worms. Is your friend gonna then wear your watch as he goes to the gun range or go golfing and beat the snot out of your watch? So that's a good question. But no, that would be a good one, to be able to have someone that like, look, I have your watch, you have mine. Let's be respectful while we're wearing each other's, but be able to enjoy it. Yeah, for sure.
I think this was pre-COVID, wasn't it? There was watch companies where you could hire the watches, but a lot of those I've never heard. They were big at one time, weren't they? Where you could almost a subscription service and you could have a Rolex for couple of months, but I haven't heard any of those around.
I haven't heard of that. That would be interesting.
Though there was a big one. There was a big company doing it, and it was a subscription service similar to, I think they do it with boats and stuff like that, don't they? Private jets, where you part of a club.
I have a friend who does that with his car. I don't know how much it costs him, but he doesn't own a car. He has a subscription service like that where he gets a new car every few months and just kind of cycles them through, which is kind of cool because he's always driving crazy cool cars, but they're not his. So it's an interesting move.
Yeah. There was watch companies that did that. So okay, well maybe we'll call that 1A, 1B then. Maybe that's not the one. I think the tricky one is going to be around, by the very nature, most watch purchases are not irrational, but they're luxury, aren't they? Beyond a basic time, you're probably not going to do well with trying to equate the money you're spending with something else in the real world.
Yeah, I would argue that pretty much anything other than maybe a $30 Casio is a luxury expense, because in today's world, we don't really need a watch. We don't, I love them. Let's be clear, but you don't need it.
That is true. I was at an event and I noticed a guy was wearing a tag the other day, and he was fidgeting with the bezel like I fidget with mine. I think it's a passive, because we were it was a busy area. He was probably feeling anxious, like there's a lot of people there, and he was playing with his bezel like I do with mine. So there's that advantage as well. It's a fidget spinner as well if you've got one with a bezel.
Oh, for sure. And I'll tell you what, I just used it the other night for timing something. The bezel on a diver's watch has so many more functions than people understand. I use it for cooking steaks on the grill. I legitimately, like you go like, okay, I know how many minutes I need, and it's actually better than a chronograph just from a pure functionality standpoint. A chronograph is a very complicated watch, and this is like, set it for 5 minutes and I can see where I'm at. I love it.
I had another thought today about one that's definitely helping me think about buying new watches at the moment. Is I've just been doing selling a few more watches on eBay, and I definitely had the mentality a couple of years ago of, well, I'll buy this watch. If I don't like it, I'll sell it on eBay. But we were discussing this on the live stream. I think the fees now on eBay are eye-watering.
It's prohibitive. It makes me reconsider whether I'm willing to go through the process.
So that's a good sobering thought, isn't it? That's definitely given me pause of, I don't now have that thought of, oh, I'll buy this watch off eBay, and if I don't like it, I'll just put it back on eBay, because you're taking a 20%, 20% hit. I sold a watch to an international buyer the other day, and there was an additional fee for the international buyer buying it. And
Yeah.
maybe we'll talk about this. So I think as with everything, a lot of things have gone up, but certainly the eBay, a full disclosure, I think eBay even might have sponsored the first podcast, their authentication service, which I do. It's funny because if you're selling high value things on eBay, they're a little bit more lenient. They put in the authentication process, and then they do have a tiered system where I don't exactly know what it is. If we do a show on this, I'll get the actual levels. But when I sold my Rolex on it, it wasn't as bad. It was nowhere near as bad as what I thought it was, because they take it. I think the most severe of the fees are on that first $500 or the first $1,000.
Yeah, totally. And that's where it really, because early in my journey of kind of experiencing moving, I did that a lot on eBay, but I did a lot also on just Facebook groups. If you get into a good watch group, it works really well, because it's very well policed by the people who are in the group. And if someone's a scammer, oh man, do they get outed, and you have to work very hard to maintain your credibility within that group. So those work well. But those eBay sales, the $400, that hurts more. You're like, I'm just going to keep it, because at the end of the day, when I get done, so I bought it, I'm taking a loss, I'm taking this much of a hit, and you go, for $150, I'm just keeping the watch.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm saying that's encouraged me to give away a lot recently as well, because I do, especially the sort of the more affordable G-Shocks and the more affordable, that World Timer, for example. I bought that off Amazon, and I got the enjoyment, I got the value out of it by having it as a great subject for a review video. So that offsets it as well, I suppose, is the advantage. Trying to not buy watches. So we've gone through research, still research and appreciate them, but maybe more like historical stuff, so you're not compelled to buy it, or certainly don't buy a homage of a historical watch, because it isn't. I was having a conversation, just to go off on a tangent, with a colleague of mine, and she said, oh, I was telling a friend of mine about your YouTube channel because he's thinking of buying a Rolex. She's like, what Rolex should he buy? So I, of course, joked, whichever one he can get from a boutique. That's the one I buy, because they're very hard to get hold of, which is news to a lot of people. I think I use the Hermes example because I think, not necessarily for any other reason than Hermes is well known for the Birkin bag, not being able to get hold of it. But I don't think people think, because they see Rolex with the full, you don't see a Birkin bag in Hermes's window, but you do see Rolex watches laid out in the window as if they're a jeweler, and people do think so. That was a surprise to her. But she told me that her friend had always wanted a Rolex, and he bought an Omega thinking he was going to get that same feeling from it. And I said to her straight away, I said that if you really love the look of a Rolex, you can buy 100 clones, 100 lookalikes, 100, and you'll never get that feeling of what you get from any watch that you really like the look of. Sort of pacifying, I think, a lot of times with watches that are similar looking. Or I don't consider I know we have a lot of friends that have Omegas and Rolexes, but I don't think somebody who's buying one watch thinks of the two brands as similar. Omega has a certain look to it, the history element to it, the engineering, the movements and everything. If you know about Omega, you love them for what they are. They're not 100%. Like Rolex, whereas Rolex has got its own swim lane that it's in. The Submariner, the Datejust, the watch that's a celebration of a milestone in your life. And Omega isn't necessarily your first graduation gift, for example, whereas a Rolex might be. So they're two different swim lanes. So
Rolex has curated the most incredible brand that I can think of. There's a lot out there, but to what your point is, for someone walking off the street, Rolex, they know. They know Rolex and they know Timex. Like, that's what they know. And Rolex is everything. And they think that's the most expensive watch you can buy sometimes. They have no idea what else is out there. And it's incredible the pull and the power that that brand has been able to curate over this time. And yeah, no, you're right. For someone who's buying their one watch, they're going to be like, I don't even know why I'm looking at an Omega. I want the Rolex. And they don't even know why they want it, other than it says Rolex. That's it. Yeah, incredible.
Have we got any more tips of how not to? I daren't say stop watching YouTube or don't listen to podcasts because we'll do ourselves out of a job.
Yeah.
But I think
Well,
I think that's a good thing because you can still get the enjoyment of watching a review of a watch and still see it, and then you can hear people that are passionate about watches as well that not necessarily.
Well, and I'll tell you, it was good for me. That's good for me at some points because I'll watch these ones and go, okay, I like that, can't afford it. And then it sends me on this. It used to send me on this hunt where I would Google like, show me other watches like that, and I'm not talking about homages, but ones that kind of check those boxes that maybe I can afford one that's not in that world, but one that kind of checks the boxes, does the things, and has some heritage, and that's a fun thing. So yeah, no, what I would say is watch those videos, and then if you find something you love, start digging around on the internet and go, hey, because there's a top 10 list for everything in the world, and you could just go like top 10 list of watches like X, and you will find them. And that's a fun exercise, and you'll learn a lot about watches you never even heard of before.
Hopefully we live to see the day where you search for make me a watch that's like this, and then it just sends it straight to a printer and it prints the whole watch out for you.
I'm pretty sure ChatGPT is working on that. They'll have it. The ultimate is how not to buy a watch is,
be 100% honest about your watch purchases with your partner.
Nailed it. That's the one.
That's the one. Commit to, hey, what do you think of, my wife is a good example. What do you think of this watch? Her usually is, haven't you got one that looks like that? It can be the most obscure watch. She's never seen it in her life before. Don't you have one that looks like that? Well, no. Or sometimes it's, well, yeah, but it's that, or maybe asking a young, a niece or your own kids that are toddlers. What do you think of this? Oh, it's awful.
No, that's the one. How not to buy a watch. 100% commit to telling your wife you're going to buy this watch. That will,
yes,
you'll never buy one again.
I love it. And the more convoluted story that you can make up about why you want it usually is the less likely it is that they're going to see your side.
Well, the most dangerous position that I happen to be in is, say, you could say that, and she'll say, okay, well, what am I getting also?
Oh,
so
yeah.
She would like to have a watch at the same time. So now this is a double purchase.
That's the cruise ship thing, isn't it? If you ever buy a watch on a cruise ship, or if you're in a port, or if you're at Diamonds International in the Caribbean or whatever, they always like, oh, you're like, oh, how much is this watch? Well, it's this, but if you buy this tennis bracelet or these earrings, we can do a deal.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's a barrier to entry right there.
Well, we've come to the end of the podcast, but Todd, I feel like we actually haven't helped. I feel like we haven't hit the mandate. I think we don't know how we don't buy watches.
Well, that's a fair assessment. I know how I'm not buying one this year, but I don't know that we're maybe the experts on this. We'll see. You know what? Maybe the people who are listening could tell us.
Exactly.
If we hit it.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback on Instagram, or you can email us or leave a comment if you're enjoying the podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Let us know, and then we'll be back next week with the watches that we bought so far this year. Of course. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.